All right. Welcome everyone to the Donald Street Neighborhood Street Traffic Calming Program's first meeting. This is September 23rd, 2024. We're meeting virtually at 6 p.m. My name is David Greaves. I'm working with NDOT as the design engineer for this project, and I'll also be facilitating this meeting. Just a couple housekeeping items. Anyone is free to ask questions. I'm going to pause a couple times during the presentation. So if you'd like to come off mute and, you know, ask away, that's fine. We also have a chat feature in WebEx. You're more than welcome to just send anything in the chat, and I've got it open, so I'll see that come through and try to get questions addressed as they pop up. Um, All right. So we're going to start kind of high level and just review what traffic calming is. The Neighborhood Street Traffic Calming Program focuses on residential streets only. We prefer physical solutions to encourage lower speeds over significant lengths. That really means we're mostly looking at like vertical measures rather than like speed limit changes or signs, things like that. And the primary goal of the program is speed reduction, and we'll go over that a little bit more in a minute. There are three E's of traffic calming: education, enforcement, and engineering. Now, engineering is bold and underlined here because that's really what NDOT has the most influence over on Nashville streets. Certainly, we try to educate where we can. There's PSAs and things that we do to make sure that people know that speeding and just dangerous driving in general is dangerous. Um, and then enforcement is entirely within Metro Nashville Police Department's realm. NDOT isn't able to hang out and issue speeding tickets at the moment, and automated enforcement is not something that the city is able to do. Um, so we try to address issues of dangerous driving with our designs and just make it more difficult or less appealing to drive dangerously where we see a lot of speeding. Um, this is a program under the umbrella of safety and Vision Zero. If anyone's not aware, Vision Zero is just the um, imagining that no one should have to be killed or seriously injured on Nashville's public streets. Um, Speed is really important to that goal because the faster a car is going when it collides with a pedestrian or a cyclist, the lower the chances are that person survives. So if someone was walking on Donald Street and they were hit by a car going 25 miles an hour, theoretically they'd have a pretty good chance of surviving. Not perfect for sure, and we still definitely don't want that to happen. Um, but as those speeds creep up to that 35 mile an hour or 45 mile an hour range, um, the chances that they're making it out of that encounter alive really go way down. So that's kind of why we've got that hyper focus on speed reduction, just because it is a really impactful force when it comes to keeping our streets safe. This is a really popular program. So in March of 2023, when Donald Street was selected, that was out of a pool of just around 480 neighborhood streets. Donald Street was one of the 25 streets selected in that 6 month period. So some of y'all may have heard we've just announced the next 6 months worth of traffic calming streets, but y'all were in that spring 2024 selection. And that graphic off to the right is a screenshot of Nashville's traffic calming tracker. That's an up-to-date resource online that you can view and basically see where your street is in the process. So each one of those lines there is a street that's either applied for traffic calming or is in the queue to some degree. So there are a few things that the traffic calming program is able to do in our designs, but there are a lot of things that fall outside of the umbrella that we work within. So things like sidewalks or traffic signals, stop signs even, are all kind of things that we're not really able to work with much in this program. But if we do encounter anything that we can't address with this project, we want to make sure that everyone's aware of Hub Nashville. um, that's basically 311 is the phone number, hub.nashville.gov is the website, but it's essentially a portal for people to make requests to Metro Nashville about really anything that the government does. So it could be trimming trees in the roadway, it could be removing debris or roadkill, fixing potholes, you name it. A lot of times they're really responsive for kind of quick fixes, and then larger projects that would take a lot of time and study. Um, they'll get records of those as well, and kind of be able to evaluate as we can. So, how did Donald Street get selected out of that large pool of 480 streets? Uh, we have a prioritization formula where we take a bunch of data after a street applies and basically weigh it against all of the other streets by these 5 metrics. So we can see the largest chunk is vehicular speeds, the second largest is volume. um, those two together really represent the exposure you all have on the street to speeding vehicles, and that's why taken together they represent the highest percentage of the score. But we also like to include a few other factors, being vulnerable user injury or fatality. That'd be like if a pedestrian was struck by a vehicle, certainly we would see that as a problem that needs to be fixed. Non-driver accommodations, that's really asking, do you have sidewalks? And if you don't, you get some points, because we know that neighborhoods without sidewalks, people have to walk, on the asphalt where cars are as well. And then lastly, trip destinations is really just asking, do you have parks or schools nearby? Um, just because we kind of want to take into account, are there things happening in the neighborhood that would encourage a lot of walking? And if there are, we want to make sure we account for that. Want to take a minute to pause and just see, does anyone have questions on stuff we've covered so far? Next, we're going to kind of zoom into some particulars about Donald and talk about the tools we have at our disposal. All right, we can keep on going then. So some data about Donald Street. This project runs from Dickerson Pike to Gerald Street, so pretty much the whole thing minus that little offshoot. We don't typically do traffic calming on those like little cul-de-sac areas, just since the volume on those segments is so low. But the rest of the street is part of the project. The 85th percent speed we saw was 37 miles an hour. That did strike me as quite surprising, just because the length of Donald isn't very long, and usually you wouldn't see vehicles consistently getting that fast on just a block or two. The volume is relatively low compared to other streets in the program. 356 vehicles a day probably sounds like a lot, but we'll usually see roads, between 1,000 and 5,000. And then Donald Street is really narrow. So when I measured, it was like 20 feet or so. And that's just about the minimum width that Nashville's roadways tend to be. So as we kind of go through our toolbox, keep that in mind. We're not going to be able to do a whole lot of the kind of roadway narrowing stuff that we're able to do on much wider streets. Just to recap a little bit, this is a map of the segment. So we've got Dickerson Pike off here to the left, Gerald Street off to the right. And this is a zoomed in screenshot of that traffic calming tracker I mentioned earlier. So Donald Street is showing up as green because we're in the meeting and design phase. But some of your neighbors, it looks like this is Delway Drive and Jones Avenue. Those are showing up as blue because they've had traffic calming projects installed already. So if you're interested in checking out, some of the things we talked about tonight, this is a good place to sort of see, where else in the neighborhood can those installations be found. We're going to talk a little bit about some of the tools we have in our toolkit. Some of them will apply really well to Donald, others maybe not so much. We can sort of touch on those as they come. But to start us off, we're going to talk about speed cushions. This is by far the most common traffic calming device NDOT uses. And the main reason for that is they're kind of the perfect example of those physical measures that I mentioned earlier. Basically, the way they work is like a speed bump, but with a higher target speed. So rather than being like 1 to 2 feet long, where a speed bump would target a speed of like 5 to 10 miles an hour, these are stretched way out to 7, 10.5, or 14 feet. And that's just to make that bump happen a little slower as you're driving over at, 20, 25 miles an hour. So we're not really looking for folks to come to a really slow speed as they go over these. We're just shooting for cars to get a little closer to the speed limit as they're driving through. Um, they're modular and come in 6 feet widths. The reason for that is to provide a gap for the wheels of larger emergency vehicles to get close to. Um, Most probably aren't going to be able to completely clear a speed cushion, but they have those tapered sides, so they're less impacted than a smaller car or truck might be. So that's what's going on there. Um, and then we usually just lay them out in such a way to cover the full width of the street. So you can see on the right, we've got a wider street with 3 speed cushions installed there. And then on the left, that street's a little narrower. So we only needed to do 2 in order to cover the pavement. Very similar to speed cushions are speed tables. Basically, the only difference here is it stretches all the way across the road. And what you lose there is just that emergency vehicle benefit that speed cushions have. We will do these sometimes, particularly if a roadway is kind of a weird width that we're not able to get the right amount of speed cushions in on. Um, but for the most part, we tend not to do these as much. Um, I mentioned that these were kind of the preferred starting point for a traffic calming design, and that's because we've seen really good results on projects that we have installed. So the two graphs we're looking at here are the average speed before and after a collection of 6 traffic calming installations. We can see that went from 31 miles an hour all the way down to 22. And then the 85th percent speed went from 37 down to 25. An 85th percent speed, for anyone who doesn't know, that's just like a statistic basically that states 15% of the people measured were going faster than that number, and 85% were going that number or slower. Um, so since you all are seeing speeds of around 37 miles an hour, we would hope that if we do a installation of vertical measures, that 85th percent speed will come down to somewhere around 25 miles an hour, what the speed limit is. Um, there are instances where vertical measures don't work super well, or we can't put them in a particular place. So we will supplement our designs sometimes with things like radar feedback signs. For anyone who hasn't seen these, they're basically a device that's solar powered. It'll read your speed as you go by and display it to you. So if you're going faster than the speed limit, you'll sort of see, oh, I'm supposed to be going this fast. I'm actually going this fast. Maybe I should slow down. Um, Importantly, they don't actively do anything to stop somebody speeding. It's not going to like write you a ticket or send your information anywhere. It's just displaying, how fast you're going. Um, so we don't see them like physically affecting vehicles at all. Uh, that being said, they do see an average reduction of around 6 miles per hour in that 85th percent speed measurement. We can also do pavement narrowing. So if the road was really wide, nice and comfortable to drive, especially fast on, narrowing with edge lines tends to kind of shrink that space we perceive to be available. Um, we don't narrow to smaller than 20 feet wide. So this isn't probably something we'll look at doing on Donald Street. And then similar to narrowing, but at intersections, we have bulb outs where if there are any large intersections along a roadway that encourage quick turning movements and fast like driving, we'll sort of take these and tighten the turning radius of an intersection and force drivers to take turns a little more slowly. Similar to narrowing, this is more a measure that's available when we have a lot of space that we don't need and kind of repurpose it toward other things. I didn't see anywhere on Donald where I thought this would be like a great investment. So we can certainly talk about these and look a little more granularly, but that's what bulb outs are. A chicane's similar story to narrowing, but just adding kind of a zigzag pattern to the center line. That both narrows the roadway, giving you less space to drive quickly, but it also forces kind of a maneuvering motion that prevents people from, going quickly on like a straightaway. And then lastly, we have traffic circles, which are another device that can be used on pretty large intersections. Um, Rather than taking up unused pavement from the outside, they start from the inside and take up unused pavement that way. And they sort of force a maneuvering at intersections that can slow cars down and make everyone be a little more deliberate when they're driving in those areas. So that is the last I've got on the traffic calming tools. Um, does anyone have questions about what we've covered so far? Next, we're going to take a look at the concept for Donald and then talk about kind of the next steps in the program. Getting some head shaking, thumbs up. Excellent. Um, all right, so let's move on to the concept. Um, So, like I mentioned, speed cushions are kind of what we start with when we're doing designs. Um, we try to space them out between 300 and 500 feet apart. So we were able to fit 3 in here. Now we haven't chosen exact locations for these just yet. This is kind of a schematic design, but basically we're just looking to cover the area, make sure we're not leaving large gaps for folks to pick up a lot of speed as they're traveling up and down Donald. Um, I know this isn't like a super elaborate design, but I wanted to just pause and give you all time. If you had any questions or comments about what you're seeing, feel free to let me know and we can talk about whatever. All right. Looks like we're all good. We can definitely come back to this if necessary, but I'll just kind of keep rolling. Um, so next is sort of the program's flowchart. What happens next. We are here at neighborhood meeting. Um, After this, we're going to go ahead and do our site visit. So we're going to check out the grades, measure some widths, make sure there's nothing on Donald Street, that we didn't notice before when we were kind of doing our initial first pass at the design. And then we're going to draw up some construction plans that'll be in a little more detail than this, kind of show some specific locations, call out, exactly where these things go. Once that design is done, we can either schedule a second neighborhood meeting to take a look, kind of review. We'll do a little bit of recap on the tools and what we've talked about so far for anyone who wasn't here tonight. And then following that meeting, we can post those plans online, do an online ballot that we'll talk about in just a sec. And then should the project pass the ballot, getting 66% favorable votes, the project will go into NDOT's construction queue. For those who are noticing the time estimates in these bubbles, that construction process is pretty long. That mainly stems from a large backlog of projects that were built up during and kind of after the pandemic. We have been pretty successful getting through those at a good rate. So that time estimate is coming down. But right now we are still sort of estimating an 8 to 10 month time between a successful project and actually being installed. I'm happy to talk about that more if y'all want, but that's basically that. Oh, and the last point I wanted to make here is that if you all are pretty content with what you've seen in the concept and are not feeling like a second meeting will be necessary for the success of this project, we can also just go ahead and finish up our design, post it online, and send you all the mailers to vote on it. So before we leave tonight, I'll kind of look for a rough answer one way or another. If anyone does want a second meeting, please let me know. That's totally fine. We're happy to do them. But we know that they're not always necessary for all these projects. So I guess with that, does anyone have a preference? Would they prefer to skip the second meeting or schedule it?
I thought the design looked great. Three sets of speed bumps on the road. Cool.
Yeah,
Sweet.
Agreed.
All right.
appreciate it.
Thank
Sounds
you.
good. Cool. Well, in that case, we'll plan on finishing our design and sending you the ballot postcards. So we'll spend some time kind of reviewing what those are. Basically, you'll each get something like this in the top left corner in the mail. It'll have a unique ID code so that you can each vote online. You're also welcome to call NDOT. It's got a phone number on there and instructions, and they can help you vote if that's preferred. And then on the postcard, it'll say when the ballot closes. So you'll want to make sure to submit your vote before the date on that postcard. You can vote yes or no, and if 66% of respondents vote yes, the project moves forward. So it's not 66% of everyone on the street. It's just like any other election. It's the percentage of those who vote. A little more about who is voting. Basically, we generate our mailing list from Metro's public records. So basically, that's managed by Metro Planning, and they pull the records from the Register of Deeds. But what that means essentially is the owners of each of these parcels is getting that postcard. Residential properties, churches, and schools each get one vote. And it is only the properties that are actually like abutting the affected right of way. So that'd be Donald in this case. To that point, these parcels down here may be addressed on Dickerson Pike, but will still, they're still touching Donald, so they would be sent postcards. Owners of multiple properties get one vote, so we don't like send a bunch of postcards to those that happen to own, like several houses. If any of these like lots are vacant, we'll see that and not send postcards to whoever may own it. And then operating businesses are not eligible. So I don't exactly recall what these two properties are, but it's more than likely that they won't be voting if they're like like a tire shop or something. Any questions about that or anything else? That's all I've got.
I have a quick question. I totally think that it's fine that we don't have a second neighborhood meeting, but will there be kind of your final design like assessment available on that ballot website just in case we wanted to see and like, oh hey, maybe they decided to add something extra or hey, it went up to 4 speed cushions or something like that.
Yeah, absolutely. So this website, TrafficCalming.Nashville.gov, is where you will be directed to on this postcard. And we always post the plans there before sending out the ballot cards. So you'll see Donald Street traffic calming concept, and um, it'll probably be like a 3-page PDF that shows what we're looking at. Anything else? All right. Well, this is my contact information. I'll ask if you reach out to me, go ahead and copy NDOT traffic calming at Nashville.gov just to keep our partners at NDOT in the loop. Um, and then, of course, plug in some NDOT social media presence. Feel free to give them a follow if you're wanting to stay up to date on all of their goings on. But yeah, really appreciate y'all's time tonight. Thanks for logging on, and we'll try to get your project moving forward.
Thank you, David.
Yeah, thank you for hosting and thank you for showing us everything.
Yeah, of course. Y'all have a good night.
You as well. Take care.
Take care.